good ideas which should have been there. Now coming to the main agenda and the outcomes yesterday. Yesterday morning, that is on 17th November, early morning, COP27 presidency issued a cover paper. They said a non-paper. Non-paper means basically a draft paper which contains a lot of, basically a declaration kind of text, and that is they call cover decision. So it is mentioned as a non-paper on cover decisions. That's what they are saying. But this non-paper is completely a draft, and that was issued yesterday morning. And since yesterday, there have been a lot of discussions on this non-paper. There have been confabulations, but now there will be, there was no declared structured discussion on this. So we are not sure what kind of format of discussions are happening, who is discussing with whom. I think all that is not apparent. That means this paper being discussed everywhere between 2 people or 10 people, and there is no formal structure to that. What COP27 president did under ministerial meetings, where different ministers were brought together and they were consulted on the political negotiation, basically what kind of cover decision can come from COP27. But yesterday, there was no such announcement. So we are not sure whether the subcommittees which are appointed by COP27 were discussing these, or even the different committees of delegates who were tasked with a particular subject, like agriculture, Coronavia, joint work program on agriculture, or global goal on adaptation, or a new collective for quantified goal. I think these are all different aspects which have been discussed in the last 11 days, and each of these streams of discussion were supposed to come up with a draft text where it is a consensual text. So that means all the members in that stream of discussion, all the delegates, they would have agreed on a consensual text. But this text did not come from many of the these different streams of negotiations. So they usually, UN, as per the UN methodology, they still put out a paper where a lot of the difference in opinions, or every opinion, they are put on the paper and they are bracketed. Once a word or a sentence is put in a bracket, it means it is not confirmed, or there is no consensus on that. But then the other point which they say is a placeholder. That means that will be put on the paper, some viewpoint, but then it is given only a place. It does not mean it has been accepted. So there are a number of these methods, and most of the draft text given by these different streams of negotiations are not consensual, or a lot of differences are there. So they go by progress on reducing the number of brackets. So they say if the brackets are nil, that means it has become a agreed or a consensual document. So even yesterday, some of these streams continued discussion on their particular topic. So even before these texts have been submitted to the COP27 presidency, COP27 presidency has issued this non-paper called uncovered decision. That means they have included already whatever opinions, differences have been shared. All of them have been included in this non-paper. Now, this non-paper has raised a lot of consternation because particularly this is very lengthy non-paper. Almost it is 20 pages and with some 8,000 words. And apparently this is double the Glasgow Pact. Glasgow Pact is it's in some 8 pages, but this has gone to 20 pages. So of course, it includes lot of text. I'll show some of that what is there. But overall important points are one. Developed countries should attain net negative carbon emissions by 2030, phase down coal and phase out inefficient fossil subsidies, and a placeholder on loss and damage funding, which means no progress. As I mentioned, placeholder means it will be mentioned, but it does not mean there is any progress on that. So these are important, phase down coal is actually is a frame which has come from Glasgow Pact last year, COP26. And of course, phase out inefficient subsidies were also mentioned from Glasgow Pact. So they are mentioned again in this non-paper. And I think again, with regard to this, goal, 1.5 degrees. So this non-paper stresses importance of pursuing efforts to keep temperature rises below 1.5 degrees centigrade and well below 2 degrees centigrade. But regrets many national climate plans since Glasgow are not aligned with those goals. So it regrets, this non-paper says that many national climate plans since last year from Glasgow, they are still not aligned with the goal of maintaining the temperature below 1.5 degrees and well below 2 degrees centigrade. So this again is again a major area of concern. Now, language on fossil fuels, as I mentioned, remains very weak because the entire COP27, there has been a lot of noise and push for some strong wording on fossil fuels, especially two things. One is phase out of all fossil fuels. India has been saying, why only coal? Let us go for phasing out all fossil fuels. So that was a proposal from India. And of course, many organizations were saying we should have a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. So this treaty is important. I think even some of the national leaders in their statements on 7th and 8th November and also recent Monday and Tuesday, they I think reiterated this demand for phasing out fossil fuel. So the language ultimately in this non-paper, it remained very weak and not on par with what everyone was expecting. And then the word, when it says rationalize inefficient subsidies. So fossil fuel subsidies have been targeted since several COPs, and last COP 26, they agreed after a lot of pressure to include a word saying phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. Now, this current COP27, they are saying rationalize or phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. So, rationalize means basically reduction or phase out. So, again, the wording is very weak. So, and oil and gas has not been mentioned at all in this non-paper. And of course, on deforestation, REDD plus scheme, which encourages carbon markets, has been mentioned, and concern has been raised that again forests are going to be commodified by using this red plus scheme. And then there are other issues like global goal on adaptation, mentions transboundary climate risk, and then it refers to the address the risks which are based in IPCC assessment report number 6. But that's only just a kind of addition rather than a decision on action. Now, many groups, since yesterday they are saying this 20-page non-paper should be shortened and it has to be streamlined. There has to be coherence between different texts which are mentioned there. And some people have been calling for identifying some key pillars of this process. So these have been discussed since yesterday, but in the last 24 hours, there is no other paper which has been brought out, which means people are concerned of what is happening behind the scenes. Because until now, negotiations were happening, a lot of people were involved, but now in the last 24 hours, what is happening behind the scene is still a concern. Then, of course, there were issues about, there is a divergence of issues on 1.5 degree centigrade goal and then net zero emissions. Net zero has always been contested because it is about continuing the emissions and solutions are offered elsewhere in terms of carbon capture and underground storage, all those technological solutions which are unproven and which are non-implementable. Human rights, of course, again there is a lot of divergence, even though it is mentioned. Gender, even though gender, everyone said gender equity, everyone agrees, but in the text, they could not agree what it should mean and how the implementation can happen. And the multilateral development bank reform was a suggestion in the negotiations, especially World Bank, International Monetary Fund. In fact, the chief of IMF herself mentioned we need reform of IMF and multilateral institutions. But then this is mentioned in a non-paper, but there is a lot of difference because China, it seems it said because the reform is a process outside UNFCCC, it cannot be discussed here. But then the people who wanted it, they are looking at how climate finance can be facilitated through this established, multilateral development institutions. And of course, debt, most countries have debt, and they said you need to look at the debt and see it as one of the means of providing finance for beleaguered countries like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and many African countries. Uh, Methane is, of course, again is mentioned, but again, not much of a specificity to what is being mentioned there. So there, I think when we look at that text, I'll discuss that on Coronovia agriculture. I think I'm looking at it this as a very important because agriculture, food security is very important, and UN Secretary General has been saying that we might face 5 locations severe famine. So he's warning of a global increase in the global hungry population. So Coronavia agriculture negotiations are happening, but there's no draft text which has been put forward, and it is very rudimentary. It does not include most of the depth which is required. And interestingly, developing countries said the term mitigation in the text in agriculture is a red line, calling it unfair for small farmers to take on the burden of mitigation. Mitigation is basically, reduction and carbon emissions from agriculture. But then, mitigation on agriculture is required because there are 15 meat and dairy companies whose whose emissions are more than at least 10 countries, more than 180 countries. Because if the together these 15 companies, they if it is taken as a nation, they'll come in the 10th rank of the nations as biggest polluters. So that means another 184 countries emissions are lower than these 15 companies. So when mitigation on agriculture is mentioned, someone brought this small farmer into that instead of saying mitigation of agriculture should be the responsibility of industrial agriculture countries, or countries where industrial agriculture is happening, or companies which are pursuing this industrial agriculture. So instead of saying that, they wanted to avoid that, and then they use the small farmers as a bait to remove mitigation as one of the requirements in this Coronavia agriculture text. But then, ultimately they came to a compromise, and different groups came to a compromise. Then they agreed on a wording. It says in a paragraph on the need for enhanced climate action on agriculture and food security, recognition that such actions are context specific and take into account national circumstances. So this is that means based on the national conditions, this mitigation should be taken up. That's what they have agreed upon. This is a usual ploy of corporate companies, so that they know national level they can do lobbying and avoid any mitigation action. So anyway, there is some text which has been forwarded to COP presidency under Coronavia agriculture, but we are not sure final text when it comes. Then the mitigation work program is again same. It was slimmed, but a lot of major disagreements are there. So overall, there are disagreements than any agreement on what is happening. And very, very important is, yesterday you United States, while discussing this non-paper, they said they denied UNFCCC principles, including the wording which we discussed yesterday. It says equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. This is called CBDR. The CBDR was agreed long back, when UNF's framework convention was agreed upon. So now US is saying we don't agree to this common but differentiated responsibility. So that means the entire 27 COP process has been negated. There's just one denial by the US. So now what it means, what is the impact of such denial is one aspect. The second is why US is denying that now. Are they doing it as a part of a negotiation strategy or tactic, or they have some deeper plan on achieving something in this cover decision. So I think this is now has become very tricky because of this. And developed countries like including US, Switzerland, UK, and Norway, they wanted elimination or reinterpretation of these principles in multiple tracks of negotiations. That means now COP28, they want this to discuss this again. So I think overall, when someone is looking at this, emergency, climate emergency, which has always been reiterated, reinforced, even in COP27 by several scientific reports. Here we are seeing developed countries stalling and trying to avoid a consensus text from emerging from COP27. So in that sense, I think some observers are saying maybe a COP27 will be a much bigger failure than COP26. So COP27 is a much bigger failure than COP26 is some of the comments which are coming up. And it appears to be so because we need to see what will happen today on the 18th November. Until now, we have not seen any major development or announcement in the public space, right in Egypt, as we are, monitoring every second, looking for any announcement or any, major, initiative which has been taken by COP27 presidency. So there have been some comments. One is, they said, of course, as I mentioned, the only paragraph in COP27 cover decision that mentions fossil fuels is very weak and only encourages the continued efforts to accelerate measures towards phase down of unabated coal power and phase out and rationalize inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. So this is the sentence which has been included, and it is very, very weak because fossil fuel phase out seems to have been ruled out by this sentence. Now, I think so this has been now becoming a heartburn. Yesterday there was a people's plenary where COP27 presidency allowed all the civil society to meet and discuss on the as a plenary. So that was a very, very huge meeting yesterday at Sharm el Sheikh. and almost all of them, asked for fossil fuel treaty. They wanted a loss and damage funding. They wanted a specific institutional facility to provide loss and damage funding, and various other issues, including food security issues, just transition, climate justice. So many of these aspects have been reiterated yesterday at the People's Plenary. Then, after the non-paper, I think there was this press conference by Alliance of Small Island States. It's called AOSIS. So they held a press conference and they expressed concern at how the loss and damage financing arrangement issue has been managed, stating that many feel loss and damage is the defining issue for COP27. The spokesperson asked where is a text on this matter. President Shokri, it seems he said, there had been intensive consultation on this issue and the co-facilitators will report back in due course. So COP27 president is saying there is a consultation has happened, so we need to wait for the co-facilitators to bring up the text on this issue. So I think the loss and damage continues to be a major problem, and this non-paper does not include anything. So overall, I think people feel that rich countries are delaying loss and damage fund, and they are insisting on more dialogues. That means it will go into COP28 as well. And additional demand which is coming from rich countries is asking emerging economies like China and India to contribute to the fund. So they are saying expand the contributing base. That means they want more countries to join the contribution to the fund rather than taking finance from this fund. So this is again it goes against the principles of the convention, because that is where this equity, common but differentiated abilities, and respect to capacities. That's a principle which has been accepted in the last 30 years, and that has been used to demand this loss and damage fund. So Vanuatu, two island nations, small Vanuatu and Tuvalu, they have in fact reiterated their request to International Court of Justice ruling on the legal liability of rich countries and companies for the historic emissions. So these two countries, they have been reeling under the impacts of climate change, and they have requested International Court of Justice to give a ruling on the legal liability of polluters. I think again this is a very significant step coming from these two small island nations. So I'll again present what we have been doing every day. This is actually the non-paper which I've been mentioning. So this non-paper, you can see it includes presidency summary of possible elements put forward by parties, the main outcomes negotiated under the relevant agenda items at this session, such as global goal on adaptation, loss and damage, mitigation work program, and others as applicable. So you can see this is how this non-paper was issued. I mean, someone has done a short listing, but the paper itself looks has a lot of text. So this includes multilateralism, food and energy crisis, principles of convention. So all these points have been discussed here. So this is one, I think, issue, and then of course we'll see. So there is this science of methane, because methane, again, it did not receive any mention in this non-paper at all, especially the contribution of livestock. So you can see 32% is coming from livestock, as in developed countries, not in developing countries. So there is a vast difference between livestock in developing countries and what is being done with livestock in developed countries. So this contribution of methane is very high, and that too from developed countries. So, but this methane, it should have come under discussion either as fossil fuel or also as part of Coronovia, joint work program on agriculture. But in both places, methane does not find a mention. As I was talking, 10, there are 15 big meat and dairy companies, which, and if they are taken as a one country, so they come on the 10th place. So top is China and US and India, Indonesia, Russia, Federation, Brazil, Japan. So all these, so these 15 companies, all these are named here, you can see. So all these together, they are on the 10th place of emissions. So I think that's where these companies have not come up as a part of this cover decisions. So that has been pointed out again. Now coming to transport, as I mentioned, transport, this is in relation with the nationally determined contributions. So, this area comparison between initial indices and current indices. Indices have been revised and sent later. So in all of this, initial indices is they talked about electrification and e-mobility. So there are targets on that. So the targets were very high, and then other measures were very high, and the target is very low. Then later, when the current indices were given, the other measures also increased, but targets have also been more specific. Interestingly, I wanted to show you, because public transit should have been a major issue, but that does not get attention as a solution, not as a problem. But here you can see aviation, shipping, freight. Freight is goods transport and active transport. So these are again other measures which have been mentioned, but they do not get as much. There's no target on that. Basically, that's what. So this is coming from a report by World Resources Institute. So here you can see President-elect of Brazil, Lula, with these two ladies. They're actually officials. One is a deputy mayor. I think she is a deputy mayor of Sao Paulo, and she is also some municipal official. So this is coming from the plenary, I'll show you this people's plenary, just a small clipping. So this is how things are standing today. Uh, I think increasingly there has been discussion on various platforms, social media platforms, on this cover decision and the role played by India. I think many observers they were happy to mention that India has given a call for phase out of all fossil fuels. When they are saying all, they are saying it should be beyond coal. That means oil and gas has been included in this phase out. So everyone is saying India has taken the lead, but even US, John Kerry, the climate envoy, he said he agrees with India. UK also agrees with India. Everyone agrees. But then the word oil and gas has not been included in the cover decision. So somewhere I think every one is agreeing to the analysis that there are 600 delegates within different country delegations who belong to fossil fuel companies. So these company representatives who are masquerading as delegates in different countries, they are stalling from any consensus or even inclusion of oil and gas on the cover decision. So I think it was pointed out last year, but still this year also we have seen the same scenario. In fact, BP chief, the BP is one of the petroleum companies, and their chief was delegate of one of the countries called Mauritania. So they found that he is a delegate there. So you can see that concerted, syndicated effort by fossil fuel companies to scuttle any inclusion of oil and gas on the phase out. So I think that is apparent. But then there are other companies also they are playing ball within the COP27 negotiations. And we have seen this meat and dairy companies and pesticide companies. So most of the big companies, Bayer, Syngenta, all these people are represented by Crop Life International, and they held some meetings within the COP27 pavilions or side events. So there we can see the intense lobbying by different corporates within the COP27 process, which I think has had influence on the content which is coming up in this draft text. So the lack of content, lack of consensus, differences of opinions, and this coming forward, going back, kind of indication from US, UK, and other countries indicates that there are forces which are inimical to the emergence of a consensual decision at COP27. I'm not sure if every one of the delegates or participants in COP27 will be able to tell us who is doing what there in the last 12 days, and whether a better strategy could have been worked out by civil society or countries like or alliance of small states, and various other alliances are there. African alliances are there. So if these people could have countered this lobby by basically naming and shaming them, but that did not happen. So when this report of 600 delegates came almost 4 or 5 days after the COP27 has begun its conference, there is no response from UNFCCC either. So I think there is a acceptance at a different level of these kind of lobbies within the climate change conference. I think they are growing in strength. If you look at the what they have done in COP26 or what they could stop from emerging in COP26. In fact, now people are saying in COP26 also the same situation was there, where they felt if the last day the cover decision will come, but it came very late in the evening, and that too happened because behind the scenes only three people were sitting and deciding what should be the wording in the text. So that included Indian Environment Minister and Chinese representative and US representative. So these three people sat and finalized that text in Glasgow Climate Pact. Now this year in COP27, today morning there was this news that Alok Sharma from UK and the Canadian minister and UK minister and I think US representative, they sat with COP27 presidency, Sameh Al-Shawkri. And what transpired at their meeting, what are the suggestions, we are not sure. But Canada has been resisting fossil fuel treaty and inclusion of fossil fuels in the draft text. And of course, US, UK, backed by Switzerland and the EU, they have been saying, trying to scuttle fossil fuels and any commitment on loss and damage. Now, apart from fossil fuels itself is a major problem. The other problem was loss and damage, where countries were expecting more open support for loss and damage funding, and then an institutional facility to administer that funding. But I think quite surprisingly, developed nations are refusing to accept a new kind of funding facility under loss and damage. So the concern, it seems, apparently these rich countries are worried that if this is accepted, then the liability, the polluter pays principle becomes a liability, and it will be a burden on their financial resources and the public exchequer. So they don't want that to happen. They don't want to commit firmly on loss and damage funding, and they don't want a facility to administer whatever funding is there. So this, I think, this reticence from rich countries is again a major problem. Just to justify their position on these two important issues on fossil fuel and loss and damage. I think countries like US and Switzerland, they now started questioning the fundamental principles of UNFCCC. So UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, in fact, has established these principles long back. So the one of the principles which was negotiated and which came out of consensus is equity, but common and different, common and differential responsibility, based on differential responsibility, common work based on differential responsibilities and respective capacities. That means each country has a different responsibilities, and based on their capacities, equity and justice has to be ensured. This is what the principle is saying, which has been agreed, which was agreed long back, not now. So, but US is questioning this principle now, and many are surprised about its stance, because just the other day, last Saturday, President Biden was in COP27, and he's reiterated their commitment to address climate emergency and take stringent climate action. So everyone thought there is some positive step coming from President Biden himself. But yesterday's stance by US indicates that they are going back on some of their positions which are declared long back. So in that sense, now I think I feel every other country can also go back on their commitments. So any day, these are all voluntary. Whatever is happening at COP, most of it is voluntary, and usually there is no outcome, because whatever outcome has to come, it has to be based on compromise or consensus. So the consensus usually is based on compromise, because each country has to give up something to get something. So this kind of a trade-off offset methodology comes when you say every decision has to be consensus. So each one has to give and take. So only then a kind of consensus does not emerge. So in this scenario, I think that decision by US to oppose the fundamental principles of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, I think is surprising. And now people expect that because of this challenge by US, I think the next COPs now have to include again this on the agenda, so that the discussion will start afresh, and then a consensus might emerge. But it means we will be discussing mostly the technical aspects of climate action rather than the climate action itself. So I think that's one. Second is Yesterday, as I mentioned, it was Solutions Day, but most of these discussions they don't have any solutions. Specific solutions have been suggested or agreed upon. So, without solutions, focusing on net zero, focusing on carbon capture technologies, focusing on pressurizing emerging economies. I think all these are coming through external pressures, external factors, and if those external factors continue to impinge on the emergence of a cover text, which is a consensual text, I think climate change negotiations will suffer, and in fact, we might end up with no result at all. And that is becoming a big concern, especially since we have seen activists, now included this year. A lot of the activists included scientists themselves. So scientists who usually sit in their lab or in the office and develop scientific conclusions, they are coming to the streets. So they are sitting on the street, or they are chaining themselves to at airports to prevent air pollution. So this kind of uh, concern is raising based on scientific reports of IPCC, and then a lot of other scientific publications based on evidence and a thorough methodological analysis. So that means the global warming, the temperature which is already 1.5 degrees or more, will continue to rise. In fact, a lot of the recent data shows that despite this COP27 COP meetings, every year the carbon emissions are increasing. So, in that sense, people are asking what are these COP meetings are doing, and what is the impact of COP discussions on the national legislation, and whether they are able to change either the national development framework in each of the countries, or are they able to look at any short-term solutions being faced in terms of climate disaster. So I think once again we are seeing this problem of a COP not arriving at a consensus, delayed decisions, and differences, disagreements are widening instead of narrowing, and there is no statesmanship kind of leadership from Egypt or within the UN fraternity. So, who will be able to bring all this together and make a difference for the environment, ecology, and people? So, I think this is getting more and more, intensified, and concern is being raised about whether COP as a platform will be able to deliver any results at all. So the outcomes are still not yet out, and the results have not been given. So today, I think on 18 November, expectedly there will be a lot of confabulations and discussions, and a covered decision will come out. But we are not sure. I think many people who are there, they think it can spill over tomorrow as well. So the discussions might continue to happen. But in any case, I think this will be our last review because tomorrow the decisions anyway will issue a press release based on the analysis. But this will be the last review of COP27 by Center for Earth Leadership and Sustainability. I'll stop here and coming to Telugu. నిన్న 17 నవంబర్ నాడు దాదాపు అన్ని చర్చలు ముగించి ఒక ముసాయిదా తీర్మానాలు ఇది రకరకాల కమిటీలు చేసిన ముసాయిదా తీర్మానాలన్నీ ఒక దగ్గర చేర్చి ఈ COP27 నుంచి ఒక సాధారణ ముసాయిదా రావాల్సింది. కానీ అది ఎందుకంటే ఈ వివిధ కమిటీల ముసాయిదా పూర్తి కాలేదు. వాళ్ళు కూడా ఇది ఆ కమిటీలలో కూడా ఒక ఏకాభిప్రాయం లేదు. ఏకాభిప్రాయ సాధన చాలా కష్టమవుతుంది. భిన్నాభిప్రాయాలు ఉన్నాయి. ఇవన్నీ నేపథ్యంలో కొన్ని కమిటీలు ఇప్పటికే వాళ్ళ ఒక ప్రతిని ప్రెసిడెన్సీకి అందజేశారు. ఎందుకంటే వాళ్ళు ఏమి చేయలేకపోగా, ఎందుకంటే ఎవరి ఒపీనియన్ వాళ్ళు ఉండడంతో డెలిగేట్స్ మధ్య ఒక సాధారణ దిశగా అందరికీ ఆమోదయోగ్య దిశగా ముసాయిదా తయారు చేయలేకపోయిన పరిస్థితులలో కొన్ని కమిటీలు అయితే వాళ్ళ దగ్గర ఉన్న ముసాయిదాని నేరుగా కాప్ ప్రెసిడెన్సీకి పంపించారు. వాళ్ళు ఇక అప్పుడు ప్రెసిడెన్సీ నిర్ణయం తీసుకోవడానికి అట్లా. అయితే ఎక్కువ శాతం మనము ఈ ముసాయిదాలు చూస్తే వీటిని బ్రాకెట్స్లలో పెడతారు. అంటే వివిధ సభ్యుల అభిప్రాయాలని కూడా అందులో పెట్టేస్తారు. అది తర్వాత చర్చించి దాన్ని తగ్గించుకుంటూ వస్తారు. సో ఇప్పుడు పెట్టిన ప్రతులలో చాలా కమిటీ వాటిలో ఈ బ్రాకెట్లు ఎక్కువ ఉన్నాయి. ఒక్కోసారి 800, 900 బ్రాకెట్లు ఉంటాయి. సో వీటిని తగ్గించుకుంటూ, అంటే అందరు కలిసి మాట్లాడుకొని దాని యొక్క భాష లేదా పదాలు ఉపయోగం ఇవన్నిటిని మార్చుకుంటూ వస్తారు. ఇది ఒక్కోసారి అందులో మునిగి ఉన్న వాళ్ళకి అర్థమైనంతగా బయట వ్యక్తులకు అర్థం కాదు. అది చూసి వీళ్ళు ఎందుకు చర్చిస్తున్నారు ఇవన్నీ అనిపించే అవకాశం ఉంటుంది. కాకపోతే నిన్న పొద్దున COP27 ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఒక నాన్ పేపర్, అంటే అది ఒక ముసాయిదా కూడా కాదు, ఒక ప్రతి విడుదల చేశాం. ఈ ప్రతిలో ఇప్పటి వరకు వచ్చిన అన్ని అంశాలను జోడించుకుంటూ రాశారు. అది దాదాపు 20 పేజీలు పోయింది. ఈ 20 పేజీలు చాలా పెద్దగా అయిపోయింది. దీన్ని తగ్గించాలని అప్పుడే చాలా మంది కోరుతున్నారు. ఎందుకంటే పోయిన సంవత్సరం గ్లాస్గో సమ్మిట్లో వచ్చిన ప్రతి 8 పేజీలో వచ్చింది. సో ఇది దాదాపు దానికంటే 2 పెరిగింది. సో దీన్ని మళ్ళీ ఒక్క దగ్గర చేర్చి తగ్గిస్తూ దాన్ని ఒక పరిపూర్ణత తీసుకురావాలంటే సమయం పడుతుంది, చర్చలు చేయాల్సి వస్తుంది. కాబట్టి నిన్న నుంచి చర్చలు దీని మీద కొనసాగుతున్నాయి. ఏ పదం వాడితే బాగుంటుంది, ఏ విధమైన టెక్స్ట్ పెడితే బాగుంటుంది, అసలు అది ఏ విధంగా ఒప్పందానికి ఉపయోగపడుతుందనే చర్చలు జరుగుతున్నాయి. నిన్న జరిగినాయి, ఇవాళ కూడా జరుగుతున్నాయి. ఇవాళ పొద్దున్నే ఒక మళ్ళీ నిన్న జారీ చేసిన నాన్ పేపర్ మళ్ళీ ఇవాళ కొత్తగా దాన్ని రివైజ్ చేసి ఇస్తారని ఆశించారు. కానీ ఇప్పటి వరకు అయితే రాలేదు. మా 11 గంటల వరకు అయితే రివిజన్ చేసిన ప్రతి రాలేదు. అంటే ముసాయిదా దశకే ఇంకా చేరలేదు. సో ఈ ముసాయిదా దశ ఈరోజు చేరే అవకాశం ఉంది. ఈరోజు లేదు అంటే సాయంత్రం వరకు కూడా కూర్చోవచ్చు, రాత్రి వరకు కూడా కూర్చోవచ్చు, లేదా రేపు కూడా కొనసాగించే అవకాశం ఉంది. అంటే మరి ఇక పోయి ఈ COP27 నుంచి నిర్ణయం ఎప్పుడు వస్తుంది అనేది ఇప్పుడు కొంత సందిగ్ధత ఏర్పడింది. అది ఇవాళ రావచ్చు లేదా రేపు రావచ్చు. ఇవాళ అయితే అఫీషియల్గా ఈరోజు ఆఖరి రోజు, ఇది COP27కి ఆఖరి రోజు. సో ఇవాళ చర్చ బట్టి రేపు మనము సమీక్ష చేద్దాం అనుకున్నా రేపటిది అవసరం లేదనిపిస్తుంది. ఎందుకంటే ఈరోజు ఇప్పటికే ఏం రాలేదు. ఒకవేళ రేపు నిర్ణయం ఏదన్నా వచ్చినా దాన్ని మనం ఒక ప్రెస్ నోట్ ద్వారా మనము ప్రజల ముందు పెట్టవచ్చు. కాబట్టి సమీక్ష చేసేంత అవసరం ఉండదు. కాబట్టి ఈరోజే ఆఖరి సమీక్షగా భావించాలి. సో ఇక్కడతోటి నేను ముగిస్తున్నాను. ఏమన్నా ప్రశ్నలు ఉంటే కొనసాగిద్దాం, లేకుంటే క్లోజ్ చేద్దాం.